The pounding on the door at 2 a.m. shattered the peace of their small dorm room at Hawthorne University in California. "Open up university security," the dean's voice boomed through the thin wood. Mila and Francesca scrambled from the bed, their hearts racing as the harsh light from the hallway flooded in, revealing their intertwined forms. "This is unacceptable. Same-sex cohabitation violates our code of conduct," the dean declared, his face stern as he held up the formal notice ordering their immediate removal from campus housing. Mila Thompson, 21, with short dark hair and fierce green eyes, pulled on a hoodie, her hands shaking not from cold, but from the sudden exposure of everything they had built in secret. Francesca Rossi, the same age, with long wavy brown hair and deep brown eyes, stood beside her, clutching a sheet-like armor, her mind already spinning through the consequences that would ripple far beyond this room. They had known the risks, sharing the single dorm bed every night, bending the rules to stay close, but the love that had bloomed in freshman orientation had felt worth every whispered promise and stolen glance until now. Security guards waited in the corridor while the dean listed the violations reported by their roommate Sarah, who had apparently seen too much and chosen loyalty to the rules over friendship. Mila packed furiously, shoving clothes into duffel bags, her jaw set against the tiers threatening to fall. Francesca moved slower, each item folded with deliberate care, as if preserving some dignity in the chaos. The other students peered from doorways, whispers spreading like wildfire through the freshman wing. By dawn they were escorted off campus property, with only what they could carry, the rest to be shipped later at their expense. Mila called her parents in Iowa first, the conversation ending in her father's cold declaration that no daughter of his would live that way, and her mother sobbing in the background before the line went dead. Francesca's call to her Italian-American family in New Jersey went no better, her mother invoking faith and reputation, while her father demanded she come home immediately to fix this mess. They found a cheap motel off the highway that night, sitting on the lumpy bed in silence, until Francesca finally spoke. "We knew this could happen, Mila, but I never thought it would feel like this, like the whole world just slammed a door in our faces." Mila pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "Then we build our own door somewhere else. No more hiding." But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her, the fear that their love had cost them everything they had worked for at Hawthorne, the scholarships, the future they had planned. The next days blurred into meetings with administrators who offered no appeals, only cold policy citations. Friends distanced themselves, Sarah among the loudest voices, claiming she had done it for their own good, to save them from sin. By the end of the week they were officially unenrolled from housing, but allowed to finish the semester off campus if they maintained grades. The scandal followed them everywhere. Stairs in the dining hall, notes slipped under their temporary apartment door calling them unnatural. Mila channeled the anger into late-night study sessions, while Francesca retreated into long walks along the Pacific beach, questioning in quiet moments if their choice had been selfish. They argued once late at night, Mila accusing Francesca of wavering and Francesca firing back that Mila never understood the weight of family expectations. Yet every fight ended in the same place, arms wrapped around each other, promising that no rule or voice could break what they had. As the semester ended, they stood together at the edge of campus, watching the lights of the dorms they could no longer enter, and made a silent vow this was only the beginning of a longer fight. The expulsion had stripped them of safety, but it had also forged something unbreakable in the fire of public shame. They loaded their few belongings into a beat-up car, heading south toward Los Angeles with nothing but each other, and the stubborn belief that love demanded they keep going no matter the cost. The cheap apartment in a rundown Los Angeles neighborhood became their battlefield and sanctuary all at once. Bills piled up faster than they could pay them, Mila taking double shifts at a coffee shop while Francesca tutored online to scrape by. The expulsion had followed them like a shadow. Hawthorne administrators sending transcripts marked with conduct violations that closed doors at other schools. Family silence stretched into months, then years, Mila receiving only a single letter from her mother begging her to repent and come home alone. Francesca fared little better. Weekly calls from her parents laced with guilt trips about bringing shame on the family name, and suggestions of therapy to cure what they called her confusion. The betrayal cut deepest when Sarah posted online about the incident, framing it as a moral stand that saved 2 souls from damnation, the post gaining traction among conservative alumni groups. Mila wanted to respond with fire, but Francesca held her back, arguing that more visibility would only deepen the wounds. Nights brought the real battles, the moments when exhaustion stripped away defenses. Francesca would wake from dreams of her childhood church whispering prayers she had long set aside, questioning if their love was the sin everyone claimed. Mila sensed the doubt, and it fueled her own insecurities, wondering if she had dragged Francesca into this life of struggle when a safer path might have kept them both at Hawthorne graduating with honors. One rainy evening after a particularly brutal shift, Mila came home to find Francesca crying over a letter from her grandmother disowning her in the name of faith. The argument that followed was their worst yet, words like weapons about sacrifice and selfishness, until they collapsed into each other's arms, exhausted and raw. "We cannot let them win," Francesca whispered later as they lay tangled in the sheets. But winning felt distant when every job interview ended in polite rejection, once backgrounds were checked, and the Hawthorne story surfaced. They adapted by building small defenses, Francesca joining a support group for queer students expelled from religious schools, Mila channeling rage into freelance graphic design gigs that paid just enough to keep the lights on. Social isolation pressed hard, old friends from Hawthorne unfollowing them online, new acquaintances pulling away after learning their history. A neighbor once confronted them on the stairs, calling their relationship an abomination in front of the whole building. Mila stood tall, defending them both, but inside the words carved deep, reminding her of every family dinner turned lecture back home. Francesca bore the weight differently, retreating into journals filled with questions about morality and whether love could truly justify the pain, radiating outward to parents, siblings, and even distant cousins who stopped sending holiday cards. Yet in the quiet victories they found strength, a shared scholarship application that got them both into community college classes, a small grant for displaced students that covered 2 months' rent. They celebrated with cheap takeout on the floor of their apartment, toasting to survival with plastic cups. The psychological toll showed in subtle ways, Mila growing sharper-edged with the world, Francesca more withdrawn, fearing every new person carried judgment. Family pressure peaked when Francesca's brother showed up unannounced, offering money if she would at least pretend to date men for appearance's sake. She refused him at the door, tears streaming, but the encounter left her questioning her own resolve for days. Mila held her through it, repeating the same mantra: "We chose each other, and that choice has to mean something." As months turned to a year, they began to see the outline of a future, not the one they had planned at Hawthorne, but one carved from resilience. The expulsion had stripped illusions, revealing how fragile acceptance truly was in a society quick to punish difference. Yet it also taught them the cost of every decision, the way love demanded not just passion, but endurance against the constant erosion of prejudice. They moved to a slightly better apartment closer to better job prospects, still scraping by, but no longer drowning. The internal conflicts lingered, Francesca journaling late into nights about guilt and redemption, Mila sketching business plans in margins of notebooks, dreaming of a company that would never ask anyone to hide. Their bond deepened in the trenches, forged stronger by every tear and argument, every small triumph that proved they could stand when the world pushed them down. The road ahead stretched uncertain, but together they walked it, one painful step at a time, refusing to let the past define their worth. 5 years after the expulsion, Hawthorne University felt like a distant nightmare until the day their startup, Harmony Tech, landed its first major contract. Mila and Francesca had built the edtech platform from nothing in a tiny garage office, teaching inclusive learning tools that celebrated every identity, the kind of resource they had desperately needed back in freshman year. Success came slowly, then all at once, a venture capital firm believing in their vision, injecting enough capital to hire staff and expand. Yet prosperity brought new fractures. Mila threw herself into negotiations, working 18-hour days, her ambition a shield against the old wounds, while Francesca managed the creative side, pouring empathy into user stories that mirrored their own struggles. The strain showed in missed dinners and terse conversations, Mila accusing Francesca of not pushing hard enough, Francesca countering that Mila had become the very corporate machine they once despised. Family pressure resurfaced when Mila's sister reached out after years of silence, offering a tentative reconciliation if Mila would attend a family wedding alone and keep her life private. The call ended in shouts, Mila hanging up with shaking hands while Francesca watched from the doorway, her own guilt flaring at the reminder of similar ultimatums from her parents. A former Hawthorne roommate, not Sarah but another who had stayed silent during the expulsion, now worked in tech and approached them at a conference offering networking help, with the caveat that they toned down their public relationship for investor comfort. The betrayal stung fresh, reminding them how prejudice hid behind professional smiles. Francesca nearly accepted the help out of desperation, but Mila refused, standing firm that their visibility was the point. The argument that night lasted hours, circling back to the moral dilemma at the heart of their success. Were they selling out by building within a system that had rejected them, or were they changing it from inside? College struggles echoed in new ways as they mentored young interns, many facing similar identity battles. One intern, a young lesbian from a conservative background, broke down in the office confessing she had been outed by roommates and nearly dropped out. Francesca spent hours counseling her, the conversation dredging up her own doubts about whether their love had been worth the wreckage. Mila listened from the next room, her heart heavy with the realization that every decision they made rippled outward, affecting not just them but everyone watching. Relationship strains peaked during a funding round when investors hinted that a more traditional image might secure better terms. Mila wanted to fight. Francesca suggested compromise for the greater good, leading to a week of cold silence, broken only when they attended a small queer alumni event and saw faces that mirrored their younger selves. The moral conflicts deepened, Francesca wrestling with therapy sessions exploring the intersection of faith and identity, while Mila buried herself in data proving their platform helped thousands. Betrayals came from unexpected places, a trusted advisor leaking details of their past to competitors, framing it as a cautionary tale about personal drama affecting business. They weathered it together, but the cost showed in sleepless nights and quiet moments of doubt. Yet success also brought awakening. Small at first, the way their platform featured stories of resilience that echoed their own, the grants they funded for students facing housing discrimination. By the end of the year, Harmony Tech had grown to 20 employees, and their bank account reflected years of sacrifice. The internal voices quieted somewhat, replaced by a shared determination that their story was not just survival, but proof that choices made in love could reshape the world one line of code at a time. They toasted the milestone in their new loft apartment, overlooking the city lights, holding each other with the knowledge that every scar had led them here stronger together than the world had ever allowed them to be apart. The decision to return to Hawthorne as major donors crystallized during a late-night strategy session, when their accountant revealed the company valuation had crossed 8 figures. Mila stared at the spreadsheet, her mind flashing back to the dean slamming expulsion papers on the table. $5 million, she said quietly, enough to fund scholarships and force policy changes. Francesca hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the table, the old guilt rising like tide. Is this healing or revenge? She asked, the question hanging between them for days. They debated ethics late into nights, weighing whether wielding financial power mirrored the institutional power that had crushed them, or if it represented true awakening. Family reactions when news leaked were predictable. Mila's parents sending a final letter calling it blood money, Francesca receiving voicemails pleading for discretion at the gala. Preparations consumed months, lawyers drafting donation terms that mandated new inclusive housing policies, public relations teams crafting statements that balanced triumph with accountability. Flashbacks haunted them, the rainy night they left campus, the first job rejections, the moment Sarah's post went viral. Mila channeled the memories into determination, Francesca into quiet reflection, journaling about the moral cost of visibility. A close call came when an old betrayer, a former administrator now on the board, reached out privately offering to smooth the event if they kept the personal story low-key. The offer tested every boundary, Francesca tempted by peace, Mila seeing it as another erasure. They refused together, the decision solidifying their bond. As the return date approached, internal conflicts peaked, Francesca waking from nightmares of her family disowning her publicly at the gala, Mila battling anger that threatened to overshadow the joy of success. They visited a therapist together, unpacking the layers of trauma and triumph, learning that sacrifice had not broken them but redefined their strength. The flight to California felt like stepping back in time, the campus lights visible from the plane window stirring equal parts dread and pride. Upon landing, they checked into a hotel near Hawthorne, the same city where their love had cost everything and now promised to change it. Planning meetings with university officials revealed resistance veiled in politeness, the board citing tradition while eyeing the check. Each negotiation reminded them of the original expulsion, the way power protected itself until money spoke louder. Moral dilemmas followed them into quiet moments, Francesca questioning if their donation erased the pain caused to Sarah or other students caught in the fallout, Mila arguing that change required uncomfortable truths. They walked the campus at dusk, hand in hand, visiting the old dorm now renamed but still carrying echoes of their expulsion. The visit brought tears and resolve, solidifying the choice to speak openly at the event. Success had given them a platform, but the real test was whether they could use it without becoming what had hurt them. As gala preparations intensified, invitations went out to alumni families, and pressed the stage set for confrontation and catharsis. In their hotel room the night before they held each other whispering promises that no amount of money or judgment could undo the life they had built. The return was not just about the donation, it was about standing in the same halls that had cast them out and declaring that love had won. The gala hall at Hawthorne University buzzed with forced elegance, crystal chandeliers casting light on faces that once turned away. Mila and Francesca entered arm in arm in tailored black dresses, drawing stares and whispers the same kind that had followed their expulsion years ago. The dean, now provost, greeted them with a plastic smile, thanking them for the transformative gift, while his eyes betrayed discomfort at the terms demanding policy overhaul. Old faces appeared: Sarah, now a mid-level administrator, avoiding eye contact, a former friend who had stayed silent offering awkward congratulations. The speeches began with university leaders praising progress, Francesca speaking first, her voice steady, as she recounted the night of expulsion without bitterness, framing it as a catalyst for their success. Mila followed, her words sharper, calling out the systemic prejudice that had nearly broken them, the moral cost borne by students forced to choose between authenticity and belonging. Tension escalated when Mila's parents appeared uninvited, her father confronting her in a side room demanding she stop embarrassing the family. The exchange was raw, years of silence exploding into accusations of selfishness and betrayal, Francesca stepping in to shield her love, the confrontation leaving both women shaken. Francesca's brother arrived shortly after, pulling her aside with similar pleas, invoking their mother's declining health, the guilt, a familiar knife. Betrayals resurfaced when a board member privately admitted the donation had been accepted only under pressure, the old dean whispering that money could not rewrite history. Public moments brought more drama. A reporter questioning if their story glorified rule-breaking, a group of conservative alumni protesting outside with signs echoing the old condemnations. Mila and Francesca navigated it together, stealing moments backstage to steady each other, the emotional weight pressing but not crushing. Flashbacks flooded during the award presentation, the packing of bags, the first night in the motel, the years of scraping by each memory fueling their resolve. A turning point came when Sarah approached after the speeches, tears in her eyes, admitting jealousy had driven the report and offering a genuine apology. The moment was not forgiveness but acknowledgement, the kind that allowed closure without erasure. Family pressure peaked when both sets of parents cornered them together, the four-way confrontation exposing deep divides: faith versus freedom, tradition versus truth. Mila stood firm, Francesca spoke of love as its own moral compass, the exchange leaving scars but also clarity. As the evening wore on, internal awakenings surfaced, Francesca realizing the guilt she carried had been inherited, not inherent. Mila understanding her anger had protected her but now needed release. The donation check presentation became symbolic, the provost handing over the oversized check amid applause that felt both genuine and forced. Behind-the-scenes negotiations continued, university lawyers pushing back on policy changes while Mila and Francesca held the line, every concession a reminder of the price paid long ago. The night ended with them alone on the balcony overlooking the campus, the same view they had lost years before, now reclaimed on their terms. Confrontations had exhausted them but also affirmed their path, the betrayals and pressures testing, yet ultimately strengthening the bond that had survived expulsion and exile. The final hours of the gala unfolded like a pressure cooker, emotions boiling over in private corners and public glances. Mila faced her father one last time in the quiet of an empty conference room, his ultimatum clear: accept the family inheritance and distance yourself from this life or lose everything. She looked at him, the man who had once read her bedtime stories, now a stranger shaped by fear, and said simply, I already have everything I need. Francesca endured a similar moment with her mother, who arrived late clutching rosary beads, begging for one last chance at normalcy, the conversation ending not in anger but in quiet acceptance of irreconcilable paths. The betrayals culminated when the former dean cornered them, both attempting to claim credit for their success, while minimizing the expulsion as youthful indiscretion. Mila cut him off, her voice calm but steel-edged, reminding him that money had forced the doors open that prejudice had kept locked. Climax built during the closing remarks when a protester slipped inside shouting condemnations that echoed the original scandal. Security moved but Mila stepped forward, microphone in hand, addressing the room, and the intruder with raw honesty about the human cost of judgment, the lives altered, not just theirs but Sarah's, the interns, the countless students still hiding. Francesca joined her, their hands linked as they announced the first scholarship recipients, queer students facing housing discrimination, the applause genuine this time, mixed with uncomfortable shifts in seats. Family members watched from the back, some leaving early, others staying with conflicted expressions, the public display forcing private reckonings. Awakening came in waves for Mila, the realization that revenge had never been the goal, only justice for Francesca, the understanding that forgiveness was not weakness, but a choice to release the weight she had carried alone. They left the gala hand in hand, walking the moonlit campus paths that had once been forbidden, the air heavy with closure and possibility. The donation had changed policy on paper, but the real transformation lay in the conversations sparked, the students who approached them later sharing stories of hope kindled by their example. Sacrifices remained visible in strained family ties, lost connections, and the quiet nights when doubt still whispered, but so did triumph, the knowledge that every decision, every tear had led to this moment of unapologetic presence. Their love had demanded everything and given back a life defined not by expulsion but by return on their own terms. As they drove away from Hawthorne, the city lights fading in the rearview, they reflected on the journey, the moral gray areas, the right and wrong that blurred under pressure. The road ahead held new challenges, but together they faced them whole. Did Mila and Francesca do right by wielding their success to force change at any cost, or did the pain they inflicted on families and old ties prove their victory came at too high a moral price?